Yes, it is finally time for me to review Joe Abercrombie on the channel. I am going to be reviewing Best Served Cold. Probably one of the most common questions I get on Discord or YouTube is if I have read Joe Abercrombie, because he is the self-named, I know tongue-in-cheek, Lord Grimdark. And a lot of my tastes tend to go towards the darker sides of fantasy. Not always, but I mean, like, Malazan is my favorite book. I really like A Song of Ice and Fire. So people naturally ask me if I've read Joe Abercrombie. And I have, but I read it before. I read the First Law trilogy, the First Law trilogy, before I started my channel. So I don't have a review on it. I don't have really anything on it except I mentioned it in a couple TBRs and that kind of thing. And surprising to some people, it's not my favorite. I don't dislike it. I enjoyed my read of it, but I was not drawn at all to come back to Abercrombie. And the character work just did not work in the same way that it worked on a lot of people. A lot of people really love the characters of First Law, like Glotka. I can't remember anyone's name. Oh, Logan Ninefingers. So anyway, all that to say is that didn't hit me exactly like it hit a lot of people, because I think a lot of people really love that. And so I was excited to give Abercrombie another try, to sort of like look at it from a new perspective now down the line a little bit, with the first standalone in the First Law world called Best Served Cold. And I really read this carefully, because if I liked it, I wanted to see what I liked about this more than First Law and try to really compare that in my head. And if I didn't like it, I wanted to be able to put my thumb more on why I don't jive with Abercrombie as much as I probably should, like based on, just any sort of objective metrics you can have about taste. Like, I like some, but I guess I don't like Mark Lawrence. That'd be like another test, but you know what I mean. People would probably think I would like Abercrombie. All that to say is I read this very, very carefully, and unfortunately, I don't have a really good conclusion to this quest because, spoiler alert for the end of this review, not spoiler alert for the book, don't worry, you can keep watching, but for my review is, I liked it, didn't love it. Again, sort of that same feeling. I think I have a better reason why, but it's just my relationship with Joe Abercrombie just keeps getting more complicated. So what's this book about? This book is a basic revenge tale. And when I mean basic, I mean really basic. Not in a bad way. I think it's obviously very purposeful that he starts out with a very clear structure. Actually, in a lot of ways, like Kill Bill, if you've ever seen that movie by Quentin Tarantino, that movie is also incredibly simple. Someone gets backstabbed, and that person survives the backstab, and then just goes after all the people who double-cross them and tries to kill them or harm them or break up their plans, whatever. And this is the exact same. In the first chapter, our main character, her name is Manza, gets backstabbed. I'm not going to go into details. Gets backstabbed, and then she just has, I think, a list of 6 people, and she's like, I need to kill these people. And that's the book. The revenge going after those 6 people. And the first weakness that I had in this book is that for the first 250 pages, that is what this is. Like, she's just going through a couple people, finding them, killing them, hurting them, whatever she needs to do to get revenge. And after the first one, it starts to get a little tedious. And it's like, is this really going to be 800, 900 pages of her just going to these people and killing them? I want to assure you, if you are reading this and thinking that, like me, keep going. Around the 250, 300 page mark, it starts getting a little bit more expansive, it starts getting more complicated, and it gets much better. So it is a slow start for me, at least, after the double cross, but it does gain momentum, and I will say the ending especially is very surprising. It takes a ton of turns that, I did not expect. So all my fears at the beginning were waylaid by the end. I was fine with all those. It's not really a criticism. Just to say, keep reading it if you're nervous about the story when you start this, because I was as well. That is, without question, a strength of Abercrombie. He can tell a story. Even in First Law, which I think famously has sort of an odd structure to it, and the story is a little weird. I don't want to say more for spoiler reasons, but it's not a traditional telling. It's still told very well, which is why people like it, even if the actual nuts and bolts are very different. This book shows that strength again. He's great at telling a story. He's great at throwing you believable curves and characters that you can at least relate to. Now, again, I didn't like jive completely with these characters, which I'll get to in a moment, but I was invested in them, which I do see a little bit of a difference. Invested meaning like I still enjoyed reading about them, finding out where they went, but in no way was I like, I don't know, I was never going to cry in this book, I guess is the point. Another huge positive of Abercrombie is he is a very beautiful writer and has quite an extensive vocabulary that I enjoy. I mean, again, Erikson, Tolkien, Martin, they're some of my favorite authors, Robin Hobb, and they have a huge breadth of how they can tell a tale. And I think Abercrombie has that same skill as well, and at times it's a real joy to read. Now the difference is, and this is where I was trying to put my finger on like the real reason that Abercrombie doesn't jive with me like those other authors I just mentioned, when I come down to it, I think it is the pessimism of his prose that sort of grinds against me over the course of a book. Because famously he's grimdark, right? And most people when they say that talk about like the violence or the sex that is in a book, which that's what that means for, I think, in my opinion, lesser authors like Mark Lawrence. I'm not a huge Mark Lawrence fan. Like, he just throws a lot of sex and violence and gross stuff in his books, and that makes it grimdark. Abercrombie, I think, is much more artistic in how he makes that, in that the prose themselves are dark. You know, if you hear someone talk about this, they'll say it's a brutal book, and it is as far as like the violence, but it's also brutal just in the way the story is told, the words that are chosen, the analogies that are on the page. I want to give you an example of Abercrombie setting the scene. This is some of our main characters going to a city. I think it's called Westport, but I think this describes really well, I marked it down, what I'm talking about here with the prose. The reins snapped, the cart rolled into the city of Westport, and Mercado and Friendly rode after. That's the name of two characters. Shivers came last, which seemed about usual lately. Beyond the walls, it was crushed in tight as a battle, and not much less frightening. A paved road struck between high buildings, bare trees planted on either side, crammed with a shuffling tide of folk, every shape and color. Pale men in sober cloth, narrow-eyed women in bright silks, black-skinned men in white robes, soldiers in sellswords, chainmail and dull plate, servants, laborers, tradesmen, gentlemen, rich and poor, fine and stinky, nobles and beggars. An awful lot of beggars. Walkers and riders came surging up and away in a blur, horses and carts and covered carriages, women with a weight of piled up hair and an even greater weight of jewelry carried past on teetering chairs by pairs of sweating servants. So, objectively, I think that's a really beautiful paragraph. But when you go back through it, it's a very brutal way of telling it with the analogies. First off, he likens this city that is just going about the day, there's no violence or anything happening, that it's crushed in tight as a battle and not much less frightening. That's the first sentence he says. And then this paved road is struck, again, a violent imagery between the high buildings. Bare trees, so not beautifully planted green trees or even like strong trees, they're bare. Right, this negative conception, and it's crammed, right? It's not full of or overflowing with. Like, I think you're getting my point here. Is like he continually focuses on the negative, the grimy, the almost depressing aspects of the scenery, of the action, of the character dynamics. All of that is what Abercrombie focuses on. And while it is beautiful and full of some really good insights also, before I do the latter half of that clause, let me just say also that he has some really fun like witticisms in his writing, which is similar sometimes to Erikson. And not just witticisms, but also like little pearls of like wisdom or insight into the world that I think is really fun and like makes you think. Like it takes you out of the book in a good way, be like, huh. Example of that, I'm trying to draw from early in the book, so these aren't spoilers, but page 128, which is a couple pages after, they're still in Westport. Merchants stood in clumps and haggles, conversing in whispers. Nowhere was a single coin in evidence. The wealth here was made of words, of ideas, of rumors and lies, too valuable to be held captive in gaudy gold or simple silver. It's a beautiful sentence and a really cool idea of thinking about economics, and even in this medieval world, how economics so often runs on things other than pure currency or actual worth or capital, but actually is a larger symptom of mankind's, machinations, I guess. As you can see, I enjoy that aspect of it. However, the combination of that prose style, the inclination towards witticisms like this, and all of the characters in this are kind of wise asses and are very sarcastic, are very sort of jaded with the world. All of this together combines into something that I kind of like just randomly started calling arrogant prose. And it upset me. And I want to say, like, not upset, that's too strong of a word. It bugged me at times and got in the way of me getting more involved in the story at times. And when I say arrogant prose, by the way, I'm not attributing that to Abercrombie. I don't know him. He's probably a very nice man. It's just that the prose themselves seem to think very highly of themselves and draws your attention to them. For a variety of the reasons I just mentioned, and that I think just grates on me, and it doesn't allow me to enjoy the book like I think a lot of people do. Just my judgment. Obviously, Abercrombie is a very successful writer, so I think I'm in the minority here, but that's absolutely what happened in this book for me. But again, all that said, I think I meant to do a lot more compliments than I did, and I hope you saw, like, I really am an admirer of some of the way that Abercrombie writes. It's just not my favorite. I will continue to read Abercrombie after this book because his storytelling is that good, and I am very enthralled in his writing style, even if it's not exactly for me. So what I'm saying is I actually really enjoyed Best Served Cold, but I did also offer me some insights why Abercrombie doesn't jive with me quite as much as some of my other favorite writers. But as a standalone fantasy, something that we don't get very often, I highly recommend Best Served Cold. So you can probably get that at the end of this, I'm going to do a long endorsement for Best Served Cold. I enjoyed it, but again, some of the writing style continued to sort of baffle me. Not bad, and in some ways objectively good, but just didn't jive with me. I know this is a very weird review, but that's just being very honest with what I thought of this book. I'm very glad I read it, and again, I will continue on with Abercrombie. What did you think of Best Served Cold? Or if you haven't read this, let me know what you think about Abercrombie or The First Law, if you agree with some of my criticisms or not. Love to talk about it. As always, first in, last out.